Welcome to the Seeing Red podcast with Andy Turner and Garrett Fools, checking up on Texas policies and politics with some federal issues thrown in, like the assault weapons ban, interest rate hikes, you get it, but it's mostly Texas, since we can't ignore the big stuff either. And now, here are your hosts, Andy Turner and Garrett Fools.
Welcome back to the Seeing Red podcast. I'm your host, Garrett Fools. I got Andy Turner here with me. She is our other host. We got producing this episode, as always, Mr. Zip. He does a lot to keep us on track and make sure that we get these episodes out when we need to, get our stuff recorded when we need to, and does a lot to make the social media happen. So I really appreciate him. We really appreciate it. Thanks again to all the folks who've messaged us on the website. We've been a lot of feedback from folks all over the state. Keep that coming in. We're getting our email list built out so soon. If you sign up on the website, we'll make sure you get these podcast episodes to your inbox every Wednesday morning as well. You can also just send us a normal email. Same way, same thing. Host at seeingredpodcast.com. That's hosts, plural, at seeingredpodcast.com. Shoot us an email, shoot us a note. And also, just a reminder, we drop episodes every Wednesday on all your favorite podcast platforms, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or some of the other ones. Next week, we're going to have Commissioner Patterson on to talk about the impeachment. Not to be confused with Jared Patterson, who's on this week. So we have Jared and Jerry Patterson. They're not of no relation and just very similar names. But we're going to have Jerry Patterson on next week, and he's going to be talking with us a little bit about the history of the impeachment in Texas. If you've never met Commissioner Patterson, he served from 2000. I think he was originally elected in 2002, began serving in 2003. And served through 2015 as land commissioner, three-term land commissioner of the state of Texas. He was a state senator before that and was the person who authored and pushed through the very first concealed carry permit in Texas. Great conservative bona fides, but also he is a walking history lesson of Texas history. He knows more about he's forgotten, as they say, more about Texas history than probably anybody else in the state of Texas ever knows. So we're going to talk to him about the history of kind of the impeachment process. And
also, interesting that you should say that Jerry Patterson was highly involved in getting CCW through, I think that was in the 90s. But for all my 2A folks, then the week that he's on and then the week after, we're gonna do a two-part series catching everybody up on where we are. One segment's going to be judicially, and then we're going to talk about some policy issues. But it should be a good time because I have heard great things about Jerry, about former Commissioner Patterson, and I'm looking forward to it.
You know, we've talked about it every week, and we're going to talk about it more whenever we get to the segment later with Representative Jared Patterson today. But it has been very, very, very hot here in Texas. But I'm escaping the heat. I'm finally getting to go on my honeymoon. We got married a few months ago, and we are looking forward to getting the hell out of hell right now, the heat. We're looking forward to getting out of Texas. And we're going to Alaska, Andy. We are...
That you didn't tell me.
Yeah, no, the highs are in the 60s right now. The lows are in the 40s. It's basically winter there. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to be on a cruise ship. We're going to be going by glaciers. There won't be an energy conservation notice on that one. I'll just open up my window. So doing my part to help the grid that way. Where did you honeymoon? Have you got? I know you and Peter got married.
We did. We got married in the middle of. Well, we got married in December of 2020, and no, we haven't gone on a honeymoon yet because one thing has rolled into another, and into another. But yeah, we will eventually. And but mostly we're kind of homebodies, so we're as you know because you've been here. We live on our back porch, and I get to watch the deer go by, which makes me so happy. I mean, yes, we are desperate for a vacation, but like, it's like, okay, so when are we going to do that? Well, so-and-so's coming, and then so-and-so's coming, and then the holidays, and, so, and we're, so we kind of vacation, but we vacation here because friends come to see us, because other than the summer, they want to come see us the other 9 months of the year. So it's fun. We have a good time.
Right. Well, it's hot now, but the Capitol is really starting to heat up with all the stuff, what's happening with Ken Paxton. Yeah. The trial, there's a lot more media attention, and there's a lot more political efforts now that the trial is getting closer and closer and more imminent. And when this episode comes out, we'll be 6 days away from the trial opening. So lots been happening. I kind of want to start with, this episode's going to focus kind of on the pre-trial happenings, the not just the motions and the exhibits, though that will be something we've talked about. That's stuff we've talked about in the past, but kind of just talking about what's been going on with what the defense has been doing, what the prosecution's doing, and what the outside groups are doing. So I want to start off. Karl Rove published an op-ed touting the conservative bona fides of the whistleblowers, talking about the work that they've done and the fact that they need to be listened to, they need to be accepted. What's more interesting is that Rick Perry has also come out with his own op-ed, both of these in the Wall Street Journal, where he's made the case that the House has made the appropriate action. This is the constitutional process, and the motion should not be dismissed. And he's making that case because there have been 20 plus motions by the defense on different ways to try and dismiss these charges. Dismiss these articles of impeachment without the Senate doing their duty to look at what the investigation of the House. And the important part of all this is House investigations are kept secret until there's a decision made, and only if that decision is affirmative, to protect office holders from false accusations.
That makes sense.
That way they can investigate them without there just being 1,000 news articles about, there is an investigation. Once the investigation is concluded, if they vote to pass it out, or if it looks, depending on if the publicized nature of the charges regardless, they may issue their report publicly, and it's at their discretion. But that is typically the end of it, and then it goes to the full body if there's a recommendation for a given action. That's why it's done in secret. But the testimony that matters is the testimony that comes up during the trial. So these tactics, these excuses are all being put forth that it's a kangaroo court by factions who are not just loyal to Ken Paxton, but dependent upon Ken Paxton for any semblance of political power. These are people who don't get a lot of people elected. They spend a lot of time and a lot of other people's money trying to get people elected, failing miserably, writ large, being very, very unsuccessful at it. And Ken Paxton was one who used them to get elected, but didn't have to use them. He had his own base before them and after them, and he is more of an ally than one of their people that they've recruited. And also, sometimes when you get involved in, I don't care what it is, but you are heavily invested in whatever opinion you may have, it's difficult to come to terms with the fact that maybe, and I'm not suggesting that Ken Paxton is guilty or not guilty or whatever, but maybe X person isn't the person you thought they were. And those are good points. But these folks are dependent on other people for clout, and if they lose Paxton, they lose all their clout. Now, they see it as a gold mine. They see defending Paxton as a way to raise money, as a way to recruit new candidates to run against incumbents. But these folks don't support the Republican Party. They support themselves. They do all of this to make their own bank accounts fatter, and they don't seem to have any ideological consistency other than they need to make more money. They don't come close to telling the truth. They make up outright lies about voting records, and they use people's ignorance of the legislative process and the thousands of different votes legislators have to take in a given session. And they say, oh, look at this one vote. It means that this person hates children. Or look at this one vote. That means they support Chinese drones. These are real-life examples that they've used that are just outright misrepresentations to a point of it being a lie.
And I gotta say, Garrett, as a legislative director, and I've been doing it for quite a while, I gotta tell you, and I know we're going off the beaten track here, but when somebody says to you, so-and-so voted against this bill, therefore, you need to say to them, what was the vote on the final bill? Because a bill in committee and a bill on second reader and blah, 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 doesn't matter. None of that matters because bill language changes.
And vice versa. So if they may have voted for something in committee and then it changes on the floor. But this group is depending on these lies and depending on Ken Paxton. And what a lot of people have learned so far, especially these whistleblowers, is that they depended on Ken Paxton to do the right thing. And they were fired. And Ken Paxton wants to pay them $3.3 million to settle the claims.
To go away.
To settle claims that they were fired inappropriately. Ken Paxton, it was reported, wanted to pay more money so that he wouldn't have to apologize. So I ask you, Andy, how much money would you pay so Ken Paxton didn't have to say sorry?
No, I mean, my money is precious, and no, I'm not paying anything for somebody to do the morally correct thing.
So when the legislature asked him, hey, how are you justifying us spending $3.3 million on this? He ghosted them. He did not want accountability for $3.3 million public dollars going to his former employees. Right. And these aren't folks that are anywhere close to being left of center. They're not close to the center. They're not close to right of center. These are people who are conservative attorneys who still fight the fight. And the thing that you can't say about these people, you can't say that Ken Paxton was going out and fighting all these fights and winning all these conservative causes, because he didn't do any of that. It was all of the work of his people and the people he recruited. The people he recruited are the ones who blew the whistle. The people who were doing the actual conservative legal work were these men and women that blew the whistle on him. You cannot say that, Ken Paxton's the only person who would go out and do this. These men and women were the ones who were actually doing the work, who were filing the briefs, and who were managing the people. Now, he managed those, and he recruited them, and he deserves credit for recruiting such good conservative people who would, when they would see their boss violating the law, go to the FBI and say, hey, this is egregious to the point where we have to come to you and tell you this.
They went to him first and said, we don't think you should be doing that because we're pretty sure that, in our legal opinion, in my legal opinion, not mine, I'm not a lawyer, but these guys, individually, in my legal opinion, you are going to run afoul of the law.
Or have run afoul. You've run afoul.
Right, and he had no interest in fixing it. He just
and they said on many occasions,
kept going.
And they said on many occasions, specifically, that Nate Paul is a criminal. In their briefings and in their communications to Ken Paxton, they said Nate Paul is a criminal. They believe he's likely a criminal, he's likely running some sort of scam or Ponzi scheme, and that you need to stay clear of him. For many reasons, and that being first and foremost. And that's from the exhibits. I'm not asserting that as a statement of fact. I am saying that was what they told him as being an issue. So, what we have in the exhibits, there's some new stuff that's been widely reported, and by the time this comes out, it'll be old news. But one of the things that has come out in the exhibits is that Nate Paul created an Uber account, according to these records, that Ken Paxton used. It had an alias, Dave P., Dave P., and this is what the House investigators are, one of the paper trail items they're pointing to that says Ken Paxton used this Uber account that Nate Paul paid for to take Ubers to go and see his mistress at a home that wasn't too far away from his own. He would go about a block away from his house, pick up an Uber, and then go to her apartment complex. But what we want to talk about mostly on this segment is how the House prosecutors, the House Board of Managers, the prosecutors, are going to attack this case. And I think what's become clear from the House investigation report, and what's become clear to me after seeing the exhibits and the total tonnage into each individual charge, is that they're going to spend a lot of time, they're going to be going line by line establishing, because when you talk to a witness, you first say, hey, what's your name? For the record, that'll go into it by whatever else. They'll establish those sorts of basic facts. Tell me about your resume. What did you do before you were an attorney? Or what did you do before you were in the Texas AG's office? What did you do while you were in the Texas AG's office? What kind of duties did you have? They're going to establish what was normal, right? They're going to establish what a normal day in the life of them was. And they're going to talk in depth for several days with over the course of this trial about why each of these individual actions was abnormal. What was different about this? And they're going to lay out a fact pattern to these senators going from point A to point B to point C of saying, this is what was normal, this is what usually happened, this is how Ken Paxton intervened, and then they're going to establish the relationship between Ken Paxton and Nate Paul and why they believe, the investigators believe, that that relationship with Nate Paul led to that abnormal action, and then they're going to prove, or try to prove, the financial incentives or just the the general incentives that Nate Paul provided to Ken Paxton, whether it be secrecy.
I would say financial.
I would say financial given the current evidence, but I don't know how they're gonna say financial, but they're also going to show the non-financial incentives that Nate Paul provided, which are important as well.
And for me, I would say incentives, sure, but I'll go a little broader. Financial improprieties, and as I was told a very long time ago, the appearance of impropriety is the same as the impropriety itself. It's not good, and I am anxious to hear exactly how they defend all of this. And I imagine they're going to try
I don't know how they're going to do it, because right now their entire defense strategy has been to obscure and to get it thrown out, which as a defense strategy isn't a bad strategy. I mean, if that when you're an attorney, you're dealt the hand you're dealt, and you argue the points that you think are the best points to argue. And before the trial, that's probably the best thing to do. I don't see how. I haven't seen anything from them that telegraphs how they're going to defend the charges, and that may be a defense strategy.
I guarantee, and I think any good defense attorney, however you feel about this particular case, any good defense attorney would be like, well, yeah, you want to throw out as much evidence as you can right at the top, because you don't want to be talking about it.
Absolutely. So of course that's of course why they're doing those moves. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to have and you don't want to have to face the charges if you don't have to. So why not write the best motion you can to try and do it? But I think what's super important that we have to get across here is that you and I and probably a couple hundred people in this whole state are the only people, and most of them are going to be involved in this trial, who've actually read all the investigation or listened to the entire investigation. Maybe thousands. There's not a lot of people who've actually gone and looked at what the evidence is. They didn't look at the investigation. They haven't scanned through the exhibits. They may have seen one or two. They may have read reporting on it, and that's all they need to. What's important for the House managers is to then reconvey all of that information in the trial so that the public can see just point A to point B to point C. Because the exhibits are useful to the public. The investigation is useful to the public. But the duty of the managers now, if they want Paxton removed, is to retell all of that story, to show why this evidence proves their case, and they have to go do it. Like, if they can prove what's in the exhibits and in the investigation, I think Paxton should be removed. But That's the indictment. That's how any criminal case works. Any case, if the plaintiff says something and it's like, oh, if that's all true, then they should get the money, then, or if, oh, what the prosecutor says, if that's true, then that person should go to jail. That's how trials work. Like, if they still have to end the trial, go in and prove that they've done all of this stuff. And I think it's super important that, I mean, I haven't made my made up. I'm pissed off about it based off what I've read. But if we get to the trial and Ken Paxton hasn't, I mean, the Board of Managers haven't made their case, then Ken Paxton should walk. I have zero problem with that. The House Board of Managers have that duty now to do it. So I think the worst possible outcome would be for this to be thrown out. Because this needs to have a full resolution. Ken Paxton's right. He deserves due process, but his arguments have been that he hasn't gotten it so far. He still needs to earn that due process in front of the public. He needs to stop avoiding accountability. And if he's successful in either getting rid of these charges by dismissal or by resigning and trying to get out of it that way, then he denies the public the ability to make the actual choice themselves. And that would be playing directly into the hands of these folks that are trying to ruin Texas with the guise of being quote-unquote true conservatives. And we are in a fight for the heart of the Republican Party. We're in a fight for the name and the history of the Republican Party. We are in an all-out war with factions within this party who care more about their bottom line and that they are in power than with actually affecting conservative change in this state. They don't give a damn about conservatism. They don't give a damn about their marital vows. They don't give a damn about any of the issues you actually care about. They don't care that kids are being trans. They don't care that there's porn in libraries. They don't care about whether or not we're paying too much taxes. They only care about whatever they can put on a mailer that will pay them to mail the mailer out. They only care about what they can put on a commercial, whether it's true or not, that's inflammatory enough that the candidate will pay them thousands of dollars to run it for them. That is what they care about. That is why you see all these ads, and that's why there's so much confusion about this. We need to be fighting Democrats. We need to be fighting the Democrat agenda in Texas. We need to be fighting it in the suburbs. We need to be fighting it in the cities. And we're not fighting those fights, or we're not fighting them well, because you have people out there who would rather lie and make up theories about what's happening in Austin or what's happening in D.C. than they are willing to actually go out and fight the Democrats. Because that's what their bottom line is. And I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sick and tired of going to Republican meetings and listening to people say the crazy things that they see in the mail or they see on these websites that shoot stuff into their inbox. This pisses them off. And of course it pisses them off, because if it was true, it would be truly angering. But it's lies. And we have to spend all this time talking about how it's either a lie or trying to do something about the lie that you can't do anything about. So we have all these people coming and pissed off, and they end up being the loudest person in the room, and they always assume that there's no one, everyone agrees with them, because no one will stand up and say, no, sir, no, ma'am, you are wrong, and here is why. And I'm committing myself to being the person who says, no, sir, you're wrong. I am tired of being the person that has to listen to all of these people and all their crazy ass ideas that they got from these stupid organizations, and just saying, oh yeah, that's interesting, instead of being like, no, sir, you're wrong. I am going to be the person at the meeting. I am going to be the person online. I'm going to be the person who refutes lies where I see them and provides the proper context. And whether that goes on deaf ears or not, I don't care. Because I'm tired of those people thinking that because no one said anything they were wrong, that everyone agrees with them. They need to know that true conservatives, people who believe in small government, who believe in life, who believe in true values of the Constitution being those that allow for people to create business, create markets, and create the happiness in their lives they deserve, are sick and tired of these people who are claiming our mantle, claiming all the work our movement has put in over the past 100 years, and saying, oh, we're the real conservatives. We want us to address these stupid issues, or we want these people. We want the government to do all this stuff for us, but not for that. Oh, these are people. It's crazy. They open their mouth and liberal talking points come out. I'm sick and tired of listening to these people.
You are sick and tired of people deliberately mischaracterizing what is and is not going on in the Republican Party.
I'm sick of it.
Yep.
I'm disgusted by it. And I have a firm belief that you have to stay involved in institutions even when they start going against your own beliefs, because that's when it actually matters. If something is easy and it's easy to go along and get along, then it's really easy to be part of that kind of organization. It's when people start to disagree, where you still have to commit yourself to your own beliefs and affecting that change. Someone else isn't going to do it for you. I'm going to be out there doing it. I hope you'll join me. But if you join the other side, I will be there to debate you. I will be there to engage in those ideas, because I'm sure as hell not right on everything. And one thing I know is I'm not right on everything. I'm right about a lot of stuff. I'm not right about everything, and I know that much.
Well,
so I will be there. And if you make a convincing case, a case based in logic and the Constitution and Christian values, then I will be here to listen to you. And Andy, I know you have a different interpretation, and we don't agree on everything, on necessarily what those values, the interpretation of those values. But I definitely believe that when it comes to the Constitution, when it comes to the values of the traditional American values, and when it comes to limited government, you and I agree. So while we may disagree on particulars, we're going to agree on those key concepts. And we need to get the people who agree on those key concepts and who agree that the left is nuts. We need to fight back against that, and then we can argue
I stood up
about
to the Democrats in the state for many, many years. I know what you are saying, and I couldn't agree more. But I will say, you and I agree on many, many, many things. I think there are one or two things that we diverge on, but you know what? Doesn't make me any less Republican, doesn't make you any more Republican. You don't have to agree on every single solitary issue. If you believe in smaller, more efficient government and less taxes, Constitution, that kind of stuff, you're a Republican. If you believe in bigger government, more taxes, you are left of center. Democrat, liberal, progressive, varying forms of Democrat. It's a bottom line. So rock on, Garrett. We agree on so much and we disagree on very little. But what did Ronald Reagan say? If we agree on seven of our 10 issues, then we agree and we can work together and rock on. That's how it should be in the RPT.
Absolutely. And, that we just kind of went over this today. We're going to be going over the math and kind of the history of impeachment with Commissioner Jerry Patterson next week. But that's Commissioner Jerry Patterson. But this week, we're going to go into our next segment, which is the second half from something last week, where we're going to be talking about ERCOT with Representative Jared Patterson. So we're gonna cut to that now.
So into today's topic, we're going to talk about ERCOT, the Electrical Reliability Council of Texas. And Representative Patterson is a huge expert on this, not only because of what he does in his private sector life, but in the House of Representatives. So let's start with the obvious. In February 2021, as a result of a fierce winter storm, Texas experienced the worst power infrastructure failure in the state's history. The outages last 17 days, and at least 246, including 146 of that, were directly linked to hypothermia that was the result of the power outage, and huge numbers of people died as a result. Total damages from the failure were estimated $195 billion, said to be the most expensive disaster in Texas history. I'm not sure that's true. I'll let you speak to that. How did we get there, Representative?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's the question, because a lot of people start with the storm and move forward. And I think that it's very important to understand what the situation on the grid was whenever the storm came. And so, really the situation that we're in Texas is we have a deregulated electricity market that passed in 1999. It was implemented in 2002. And we were blowing and going on the grid. We had, a lot of coal-fired generation, a lot of natural gas generation. Around 2008, 2009, the fracking revolution happened, and we opened up more than a century's worth of natural gas reserves here in America, Texas, in America, the Saudi Arabia of natural gas globally. And so just loads of opportunity. But along those same kind of timelines, the federal government started dumping billions of dollars of investment of your tax dollars into federal tax credits for wind power generators. And so to make a very long story short, we started seeing folks come in and buy up or lease land way out west in West Texas, build all of these wind power generators out there in West Texas, whose break-even point is negative 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. That's the break-even point because of all the federal subsidies. It's unbelievable. And so they did that. We spent billions of dollars as a state on transmission infrastructure to go all the way out to West Texas and to bring that wind power into the load centers. And what happened was it depressed the market enough to where the more reliable generators, the older coal-fired generators, some of the older natural gas generators, they could no longer make a profit. They couldn't compete with the subsidized wind power that was being built in Texas to the tune of 40,000 megawatts that we have on the grid right now. Now, only a fraction of that actually works when we need it, but it was all there. So you move forward into time and you get to 2021 and Winter Storm Uri, and we're in a situation where our reserves are significantly lower than they've ever been. We have all of this wind power, but the wind power doesn't generate during extreme weather. We're seeing it this week with the extreme heat. We've seen it in the winter storm that happened earlier this year in 2023, and we certainly saw that in 2021. At the same time, natural gas power generation was going up by 450% to save Texas. Our wind power generators went to zero, and solar wasn't even hardly a thing because of all the clouds. And so that's kind of where we were at the time. We hadn't adjusted the market structure at the time to account for the massive subsidies and all this wind power on our grid. We've done a lot of those things now, and I'm sure we'll get into the fallout of Winter Storm Uri. But the real story of Uri is a massive failure all across the board, a massive black eye on the industry. But more than anything, it's the story of kind of where we've been in the electricity industry. And then
when you said when Winter Storm Uri hit, there was the ERCOT had been deregulated. You meant that all of these pieces that make the electricity go had been broken up. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, well, that happened in 2002.
Okay, but that's where it stood. And now, so we
created a market that went into effect in 2002 where you had all these folks competing against each other, trying to bring a better product to market. And then all of a sudden you have this flush of federal dollars coming in and flooding the market with wind power, which destabilized the market, destabilized the grid, put some of these older power plants out of business completely, like just literally shut them down because they couldn't compete, because wind power's break-even point is negative 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So when you're break-even, when the government is basically paying you to take their product versus you trying to sell a product at a competitive price, they're at a complete disadvantage.
And as you pointed out, how's that wind power thing working out now?
Yeah, it's not. In fact, I call it the biggest infrastructure mistake in Texas history. It's been a complete disaster because it doesn't work when you need it to. The biggest problem with wind power is that it works great between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. That's when it works great. And if you look at the data, you'll see that. You'll see this big spike up around midnight, and then it comes down. Every once in a while, it works till about 10 a.m. in the morning, but more often than not, it's about 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. That's when we need power the least, is 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. And so, it works the best when we need power the least. When you look at the heat of the day, these really, really hot summer days, wind power is in the tank. When you look at these extreme cold winter storms, like Winter Storm Mara, which happened in late January, early February 2023, or Winter Storm Uri, which happened in February of 2021, wind power is non-existent. It doesn't work when you need it. So to flood the grid with wind power, which takes out dispatchable generation that can come on when you need it, and to flood the market with wind power and raise everyone's transmission and delivery rates to pay for all this infrastructure to bring it to market for a product that does not work in extreme temperatures, it is the biggest infrastructure mistake in Texas history.
All right. So we had this huge thing. We now understand how we got there. What's changed since then?
Yeah, and I don't want to put it all on the feet of wind. I mean, that helped destabilize the market and created a lot of issues. But you also have to understand that Winter Storm Uri was unlike anything that we'd ever seen in the history of our state. I mean, when there's ice piled up on South Padre Island, that's something that's unheard of. And so, it wasn't just the destabilization of the market. That certainly contributed to it, but it was also just, folks trying to contend with wind chills like no one's ever experienced before. And, a lot of the generators went out, they tried to spend money the weekend before to winterize and do things, but it just wasn't enough because it was significantly colder than anyone imagined. But a long story short is, in the immediate aftermath of Winter Storm Uri, it happened during a legislative session. A number of bills were passed. But first and foremost, we completely wiped clean the ERCOT board. ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, they're the ones that operate our grid. We completely fired everybody, all new board members, appointees mainly. It was industry folks that led that board. Now it's all different folks that are appointees. We wiped clean the Public Utility Commission of Texas. There was a 3-member board of the commissioners that are the regulatory body for ERCOT and a number of other things. Wiped that board clean. We actually have 5 commissioners now instead of 3, so that in an emergency, at least 2 of them can communicate. 2 of them couldn't communicate during Uri because of the Open Meetings Act. You can't have a majority of a board that communicates outside of a public meeting. So we expand that to 5. But we also made sure that before the very next winter, before the winter that started in late 21, every single issue that they had as a result of the winter storm and Winter Storm Uri with the generators was solved, was addressed, was fixed, leading into the very next winter. One of the other things that went wrong was that part of our natural gas infrastructure that should have been designated as critical load wasn't. And so we made sure that everyone filled out the appropriate paperwork to make sure that they didn't get curtailed on the electricity side, and then they weren't able to supply the natural gas to some of the generators that did go offline during Uri. It was a small percentage of them. Natural gas overall overwhelmingly performed, but there were some issues there as well. So there were issues through every aspect of the boards, the regulatory bodies, the physical infrastructure that's in place on the grid. And then also they started remaking the market structure. So I talked about how wind power breaks even at negative 2.5 cents and how folks can't compete. Well, 2021 started us on a pathway to put some different types of incentives in the market for folks that actually show up during the highest needs in the market. So the PUC developed this plan. Now folks are going to get a little added financial incentive for being available when we actually need them. That will put wind power out on the side where they can't participate in that at all.
Representative, I have a quick question. What kind of weather or climate conditions or other conditions would be necessary for us to have a similar type of accident or incident again, and what are we doing to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. The hard part is that you can't really pay for every conceivable act of God that could ever possibly happen, right? Like as soon as you winterize to 2 degrees, then it's going to be negative 2 degrees. As soon as you winterize to negative 2, it could be negative 10. But what I will tell you is that the winterization of these power plants, there are now mandated winterization requirements. The critical infrastructure that I mentioned earlier, all of that paperwork is in. We know what the critical infrastructure is versus not. The regulatory aspect, the framework in the market to better incent these other types of generators. So hopefully we get more of those to come in. We did a lot of that additional incentives this session in 2023. So everything about the market is different today than it was leading into Valentine's Day in 2021. PUC is different. ERCOT board's different. The way that they handle reserve power and getting power plants online and ready in case they're needed, that's different. Everything about the market is different. So it might as well be a completely different state in a completely different market because everything has changed since 2021. And keep in mind, this is what a lot of people don't realize, and I think it's a very important point. California is the largest state in the union, but California's peak electricity demand is only 60% of Texas's peak demand. In fact, Texas's peak demand is larger than California and New York's combined. And people don't think about that. But with the economic growth that we have here, with the population growth that we have here, with the extreme heat that we have here in our state, and that's the primary reason, our peak demand is huge. It's a huge peak demand. It's a huge number. And so we are now very conservatively managing the grid to the point where we had over 10 new all-time peak demand records last calendar year. And this year, we've already had several new all-time peak demand records in ERCOT. Because of those combination of economic output, population growth, and heat, we're hitting new records every summer, new record peak demand, and we've been able to meet those peak demand, at least to date, while we're piecing together incentive packages to bring more reliable power here to Texas.
Today, I'm seeing reports that the peak demand level is being reached for operators, which I believe is set at 5,000. I believe it used to be higher. But that's obviously something that at some point will be passed down to consumers. Do you know, what's going on there, and how can what's the best way to actually lower bills for us, the consumers, or the people who are using the electricity?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that because the media gets this wrong all the time. They'll talk about, power prices are blowing out today, your bill's going up and this and that. But at the very least, residential consumers aren't paying a real-time market price for power. You used to be able to get a plan like that, but they actually banned those a few years ago. But no one's paying a real-time market-based price for power. Now, some businesses do. Some businesses take on that risk, and they'll pay a variable rate or a market-based index rate for power, because what they'll do is they'll actually manufacture their product until power prices get to a certain point, and then they just shut down completely. And on average, they'll pay 2 cents versus having a fixed rate of 5 cents because they're the ones that are bearing that risk. But my point is that when the media says, "Oh, prices spiked today," most consumers in the deregulated market are on a guaranteed fixed rate contract, right? I signed up for 3 years. I'm paying 8 cents for 3 years. That's my rate regardless, period, the end. Most people aren't going to be affected by intraday trading. Even if you're on a month-to-month deal, most consumers would have a product that is an average product over the course of 30 days in a month. So if 1 hour or 6 hours or 12 hours throughout the course of a month hit the price cap in the market and prices explode, in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that big of a deal. Now, the problem with Uri was we hit the price cap. Number one, the price cap was almost twice what it is now. So they did lower the price cap from $9,000 down to almost half of that. But we hit the price cap and we stayed there for 4 days, 4 whole days, 24-hour periods. And electricity is priced in 15-minute intervals. So that was a big problem during Winter Storm Uri. It's why some of the generators lost millions of dollars. It's why some consumers have faced really, really high prices. But when you're looking at this thing in the grand scheme of things, a handful of hours over the course of 30 days you're barely going to see a blip on the radar for the average homeowner.
So what you're saying really, in my mind, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but the media, when they report, oh, the prices are going up or whatever, it's really, the sky is falling. The sky is not falling.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
it's Chicken Little. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, most of the media wants Republicans to look bad. Most of the media doesn't know anything about anything when it comes to the power grid. And a lot of them just regurgitate talking points that they hear from other folks. One of the funniest things that I think about our entire in all of the reporting on the electricity grid is folks keep talking to this one guy who they claim is an energy expert, and they keep quoting him in all these articles, and he's just a shill for the renewable industry. That's all he knows. He doesn't even work in the industry. He just is a shill for the renewable guys, and the media pumps him up as some kind of energy expert, and he's never been in the field or done anything. So the media doesn't know what they're talking about 99% of the time. I will say that there's a guy named Brad Johnson who works for the Texan in Austin, and he's not a native Texan, but you wouldn't have thought that. Like, he came in before Uri, and he learned everything that he could about the grid, and all of it. He had the most accurate reporting of anyone I've seen when it comes to issues on the grid as it relates to Winter Storm Uri and then the fallout of Uri. He's done a phenomenal job because he took the time to learn it.
right? And it's important to present the facts. I mean, that's what a journalist is supposed to do, is present the facts and let people to come to their own conclusion. What do you see happening as the result of all of this electric vehicle stuff?
There's so many issues that it's kind of hard to know where to start on this topic. Number one, the oil and gas industry funds the state of Texas. It funds our schools. It funds our roads. It funds everything that we do as a state is tied back to the oil and gas industry. Severance taxes that are paid into the state. Our rainy day fund as a state. So the oil and gas industry, number one, is the most important industry to the state of Texas, period, the end. There's almost no second place. And we've got a great agricultural, manufacturing, all these other things. But oil and gas industry is the backbone of the state financially. So anything that disrupts that is not good for the state of Texas. The wind turbines and the solar generators, they're not paying into the permanent school fund or to, these funds that fund our state. So that's number one. Number two, when it comes to the grid, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm gonna fuel my car with electricity because it's not using fossil fuels. Well, natural gas is by far and away the number one fuel source for our grid, and coal is a significant piece of it as well. So it's not necessarily true. But I think my biggest beef with this whole thing is that these so-called environmentalists, they don't even pretend to care about where these, batteries, where the components for the batteries are mined. I mean, cobalt and these other things that they have to mine out of the ground, largely in Africa, largely with child slave labor, largely in mines owned by the communist Chinese. That's where this stuff is mined from, sent over here in these batteries without any way of really disposing them, environmentally friendly disposal. There's not any way to really do that. We've got volunteer fire departments out along some of our major highways that don't even have the tools. Most fire departments don't have the tools to put out one of these batteries if it catches on fire. There's all kinds of problems with this, and that's before we even get to talking about the grid and right. The situation that we're in with the lack of resiliency on the grid as a result of the renewables taking such a strong foothold here. So I have a lot of problems with this. That's a really deep topic if you want to get down to it. But I think the bottom line is, why do we want to put these grown men out of work in West Texas that are pumping oil out of the ground so that we can hire these children in Africa to mine this material? That's what I don't understand, and that's something that the environmentalists haven't been able to answer to date.
And I appreciate all, and I know that you do too, all that oil and gas has done for Texas and continues to do. We talked about zombie wells a couple weeks ago, but I want to just clarify a point that I think we agree on. If something came forward that was not just environmentally safe, something in the future, not just environmentally safe, but didn't involve enslavement, didn't involve communism, didn't involve, you're not saying never, ever, ever, you would never consider.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the biggest thing that I think we need to do for the grid is to expand nuclear and supplement it with as much natural gas as we can. And those are the two, nuclear produces no carbon emissions. And, natural gas is the cleanest burning fuel source that we could have that's actually reliable. And so, I'm not I don't drive down the road and toss out my Whataburger bag on the side of the road.
Right.
I don't want a dirty environment, but there's no invention in the history of mankind that has led to more prosperity than reliable electricity. And if we are going to go back to the Stone Ages and rely on the wind and the sun, you're not going to have the 9th largest economy in the world, which is what Texas is, able to operate in that manner. We have to have something that is reliable, that we can count on when it's 110 degrees outside or when it's 2 degrees outside. And the only thing that we have that is the best possible option is nuclear and natural gas. And until there's something better, I'm going to hitch my wagon to those horses.
All right, Representative Jared Patterson out of Frisco, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about ERCOT. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this week's Seeing Red. We're always glad to have you, and we definitely want to hear your opinions. You don't like something, we want to hear about it. You like something, we want to hear about it. You want more of something, we definitely want to hear about it. You know how to reach us, seeingredpodcast.com. You just slide down the first page. There's a form. You can email us, hosts@seeingredpodcast.com. I'm on Twitter. Garrett's on Twitter. Seeing Red is on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. There's a ton of ways to get a hold of us. So tell your friends, and thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Seeing Red podcast. It's always Texas politics and beyond. We present the facts and opinions. The Seeing Red podcast with your host, Andy Turner and Garrett Foles. Thank you, and tune in next week. And please do us a favor. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode.